Okay, it's Alexander Lawrence from the Portable Infinite, and we're talking to Michael Gira from the Swans, and I guess we're going to focus mainly on the new record and the big tour coming up. The new album's called The Beggar, and it's the 16th record from the Swans, and it's kind of after a little kind of break from the COVID break, they come back and they've done this record. So I got a lot of questions. It's great to see you today, Michael, and great.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
I'm calling you from LA. You know, I'm a little younger than you, but you know that's okay. But so
Where do you live in LA? Where do you live in
uh,
LA?
I live in Orange County, but right now, but you know, but I lived in like you know I used to live on Fairfax and Santa Monica around there that area, and
I lived there for a while.
downtown LA. You know, and then
Yeah.
San Francisco. And I used to see you around in New York a lot. Back in the 90s and stuff, and but we'll get to that. Okay, so my first question. Okay, so when I was a kid, I mean, since I was like when in '77, I was like 13 or 14. Like I used to read about punk rock and in magazines like Rolling Stone and Cream and Circus and all these magazines, and like so I didn't really get to experience any bands till '79 or '80, and by that time you kind of felt like it was kind of over. So what do you think? I mean, punk rock, it's almost like a modernism now, you know, like the people kind of look back and refer to it as some kind of golden age. I mean, what do you think punk rock has to do with Swans? You know, because like when I heard those records, I remember after reading about them and thinking like, oh, this is going to be like the end all. These are going to be some great records. I mean, the Sex Pistols and the Clash ended up being kind of conventional records, you know, kind of like angry
Yeah,
Chuck Berry records or something. And it
that's
wasn't
right.
it wasn't until I saw like bands like Suicide Pill or Birthday Party, I was like going, wow, these guys are really kind of doing what I was expecting, what it was going to sound. Because like Suicide, for instance, like they took away the whole guitar, bass, drums thing of rock and roll and kind of replaced it with their own spin on things. So, I mean, how does punk rock kind of have anything to do with Swans, or you know, what's your experience of that
A
time?
lot. It has a lot to do with the early days, but not stylistically, of course. Um, well, I was involved in the LA punk scene. I don't know if you're aware of that. Um, I was in art school in LA. I went to Otis Art Institute. And right around the time that the punk scene happened, there was this benefit for the punk club, The Mask. And it was right around the corner. It was at some Elks Lodge or something. And I went right around the corner. It was right around the corner. And I took the video camera from the equipment room from Otis, which then was a rare item, and went and videotaped the debacle show. And it was like the Germs, the Bags, Weirdos. I'm not sure the Screamers played. Just the whole acts, of course, all these bands. And I thought it was great. I wasn't thinking critically, musically at the time, but it was just this outpouring of chaos and anger, which I thought was wonderful. And it kind of changed me in the sense that I was already disgruntled with the art world I was about to embark upon. I really didn't like the atmosphere of the scene that one would have to become involved in to have any kind of art career. I didn't like the people. I thought that if I was going to enter into that kind of situation, the kind of professionalism that seemed to be involved, that I should choose to be a lawyer instead of an artist. And that was at the new burgeoning of art kind of double speak, this recondite language that was developing. And it made me very cold because of the art that I was interested in was much more visceral and had this underlying aspect of mystery to it. But anyway, when punk happened, I thought that it was entirely relevant, not just the LA punk, of course. I was aware of the Sex Pistols and other burgeoning kind of musics. But I thought it was entirely relevant to modern consumerist society, in that it was this expressing this kind of revulsion of what was going on in the world. And it made a lot of sense to me. And so my friend and I, Bruce Kalberg, we published this magazine called No Magazine, No, N-O magazine at the time. Well, I did a couple issues with Bruce, and it sort of married, in this bungling way, our interest in the more kind of animal aspects of art with music. And we had interviews with Suicide, for instance, and with X, and the typical things. I did the first ever interview with the Go-Go's, which was fun. And so I was involved in that scene. I saw all the shows all the time. My favorite band of all those bands was the Screamers, who, like you mentioned, Suicide, were doing something different. And I thought they were fantastic.
Well, also in the art world, I mean, there were in the 70s, there was like there was a lot of minimalism going on. And I mean,
well, I actually, now in retrospect, I really like minimalism a lot. I very much am drawn to it.
But
Richard Serra is one of my favorite artists.
No, I like that.
But the whole language surrounding it is, I guess, and just the careerist aspect of it, just really turned me off. So anyway, I left it. But eventually I started making music, and I had a band in LA called Little Cripples, and I have no idea what we sounded like. I don't remember anymore. It's been so long. And that kind of went nowhere. And then, of course, I knew about Suicide and Teenage Jesus and Theoretical Girls and the Contortions and all those things that were happening in New York at the time. Just a minute. Sorry, my daddy's working here. I forgot. Sorry, Mikey. Sorry, that's my little son.
Yeah.
So I, with my then girlfriend, Susan Martin, and the guy I was working on songs with, Bruce, Rick Oler, decided to move to New York and see what we could do there.
Well, getting back to Suicide, like I remember they played like 3 nights at the Universal Amphitheater with Cars, and I don't know.
Yeah.
You said you went there to at least one of the nights, and I remember
I didn't go to one of those nights. I did not go to those shows.
Oh,
they played a side gig. They played a side gig at a little fly-by-night punk club, maybe to 100 punks.
Okay.
And they set up on the floor. There was no stage. And as Alan Vega was performing, it was great. But as he was performing, the punks were lined up right at his face, and they were spitting directly in his face. And he was rubbing it across his face and into his mouth and just saying, thank you, and then hitting himself in the face with this microphone and saying, thank you. And I just thought that was tremendous art. It's just amazing. It's like this taking abjection and making it a form of strength. And I just found it wonderful.
I think he did a similar tour like that with the Clash, and I think he got the same reaction.
I think that was much more dangerous. I think the Clash audience was really violent towards them, threw like beer bottles at him,
And so, when I saw him with the Cars, like the Cars audience wasn't having it either. I remember like in LA at that time, they had like the Cars and Suicide, and people were kind of booing him, and he was doing Dream Baby Dream and pulling up his collar and stuff. And I remember that. And then I remember at the same time, like Black Sabbath played with the Ramones at the Santa Monica Civic. Do you remember that show? And they got booed off stage.
No.
Okay, so you weren't there. Okay, enough.
No, I didn't go to that. I did go to I think it was the Cramps opening for, what was it? Not Gang of Four.
No,
some band like that at the time. It might have been The Clash. The Cramps were opening,
yeah, I think that might.
and I drank a lot in those days, and I ended up getting lifted up by two bouncers and thrown out onto the pavement, smashed my face on the pavement. I was screaming. I think I was screaming at The Clash that they were posers or something. I don't remember, but yeah, the whole punk rock thing was meaningful to me. Once it shifted to hardcore, I had pretty much zero interest in it. It became this macho thing, and it was like the guys that would beat you up in high school. It was just really stupid, and there was a diminishing amount of females at the shows, and the whole stupidity of the stage diving and everything. I just thought it was really dumb. In the mosh pit, I mean, what stupidity! That didn't exist in the early punk days.
Well, I mean, I saw Black Flag in '80, and I mean, it was interesting to see the star at the Starwood. It was interesting to see that environment, but a few months later, I was kind of bored. I was just okay, people kind of do the same thing, and it's like almost like repetitive action.
Yeah, I mean, Black Flag had some very good moments, but in general, the run of the mill hardcore band was just appalling to me, and the whole scene and the macho aspect of it was just really dumb.
Yeah.
So punk rock had its moment, but to me it wasn't what I learned from it was not the style of it or anything. It was more the idea of making something happen with limited means, with whatever you had at your disposal. And when I started Swans finally in New York, I had another band, which is not worth talking about before then. But I sketched out the beginnings of the pieces, the songs on a bass guitar, which I really had no idea how to play. I just found a note on the neck that I sounded good, and then I made these chords, and I would just kind of bash them in a rhythm and think about how the drums would be, and then work with the musicians, and the songs would build up. And it sounded visceral and real, and mostly it kind of felt like tearing your guts out, and I had a excuse to scream, which is kind of what I wanted to do.
So when you get to the album Filth in '83, I mean, it still sounds like today's Swans, but it just seems more like rock influence and stuff. Like, was that because the people that you were playing with kind of were coming out of that?
How do you mean rock? How do you mean rock in the rhythms?
I don't know. Just I mean, like today's Swans just doesn't really sound like anything, like else. There's not. It just kind of. But the earlier Swans just sounds. It sounds more like, okay, well, you could play with other bands like at the time, and it wouldn't seem like out of character,
Sure, whatever. Yeah.
Anyway,
we worked by intuition and built up our sound, and of course, it's been, what is that? It's over 40 years. So.
I mean, some of the people that played in those bands back then, they might have went on to play in more conventional rock bands. Do you think that's possible?
Like whom?
There was a girl guitar player, or
Sue Hannell. She disappeared.
Okay, well, not her.
Sue was actually ferocious. She was an incredible guitarist. The only problem with Sue is that she would do these amazing soaring lines, and it was just like you couldn't believe you were hearing it. It was so all-encompassing. And then the next show or the next rehearsal, she had no idea what she had done, and it would be completely different and often not any good at all. And then 3 rehearsals later, she would do these amazing things. It's just she didn't have the sense of having some kind of continuity. You don't have to play exactly the same thing, but there was just no continuity whatsoever. It's like one night she sounded like a sort of protean Casper Brodsman or something, and the next night she sounded like someone scratching on your guitar with an ice pick.
Well, what about sample? It seemed like the Swans did samples more in the '80s, and when did you stop doing that?
Well, I used tapes. We didn't have samples. I recorded. There was this previous to samples existing. I wanted more sound. We had 2 drummers, 2 bass players, myself being one of them, and a guitarist. And one of the drummers played metal and things. And the other bass player, aside from myself, I had made these cassettes of different sounds, like a roar or just random clattering of metal or a slowed down scream. And we would have a cassette player on top of an SVT rig and connected to a volume pedal. So that you put a cassette in the player and the cassette was playing constantly the sound, say it was going, and through with the volume pedal, he could bring the sound in and out in rhythm. So it just made this additional oomph to the sound. Later on, when sampling became possible using delays, you have a delay unit, you could grab a sound and have it repeat. We use those for different, like, this is pre-samplers as well. The song Time is Money Bastard on the album, it's a single actually, Time is Money Bastard. I recorded and sampled into this delay unit, the nail gun I use it at my construction job. And that became the snare. And I think even the kick pitched down an octave. And so that's how the drum was made in that instance. But gradually, as time went on, when Jarbo and I made samples for her of organs and different things, of little figures from other records, always changed them so they weren't recognizable and use those as part of the texture of the sound. And then by the time of Soundtracks for the Blind in the late 90s, there was a lot of field recordings used and some so-called samples, but I tend to look at them more as field recordings. They were used. And with this project I did immediately after Soundtracks for the Blind, The Body Lovers, I used lots of pre-recorded stuff as well as stuff that was played by musicians and mixed those together. But then when I disbanded Swans in the late 90s, I was wanting to make a complete change. And I had these trunks full of hard disks, floppy disks of different sounds, drums, atmospheric sounds, all these sounds, just trunks full of these opening booklets that I had used throughout Swans. And I took them to dump and threw them away. And that's when I started my group Angels of Light. And I just used my acoustic guitar and had other musicians play actual music. And we don't really use samples anymore. There is a piece on the new album called The Beggar Lover, which uses pre-recorded things, but it's not really samples.
Yeah, well, I read Thurston Moore has a memoir that's coming out. I read that, and I previously read Kim Gordon's book, and they all kind of talk about that early tour you did with Swans and Sonic Youth, and I mean, there was like before you, there was a lot of these no wave bands that were in New York, and they seemed like, oh, we just want to play around New York, and that's like our goal is just to do a big gig in the East Village or something. Was there an idea at some point with Swans and Sonic Youth to get outside New York and just to go out there and play? And what were those early tours like? And there was like there was described in the book as like people sleeping in like Econoline vans and stuff, you know, side by side.
Yeah, windowless Econoline vans with the gear. Yeah, it was shambolic, as you might expect, and difficult. But you know, we were much younger; we could withstand anything. And there was no money, there was no audiences. I think a big turnout on those little tours would have been 50 people, and I highly doubt we ever had that. Yeah, what did we call it? The Savage Blunder Tour?
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was, just a big mess. But we kind of had to make the move to get out there and be a real band rather than ditsing around in the Lower East Side, you know,
Right.
and playing for audiences. So we just kind of went out and did it. And that's how Swans did their first tour of Europe as well. We had a couple gigs lined up, and then we ended up staying for something like 2 months, just through word of mouth, traveling around, and it was no money at all, just really hungry quite often. And somehow just made our way around Europe and ended up in London. And fortunately, through the good graces of Jim Thirlwell from Fetus, he recommended this label person to come see us opening for the fall in London. And we got signed on the basis of that show. And that was where everything changed, thanks to Jim.
It kind of, for Swans, it kind of happened in Europe first and then America?
Nothing happened in Europe. I mean, we were playing to 0 people, basically. Yes, so the label was called K422. It was part of Some Bizarre Records. Changed everything, yeah. We started getting press over there, and then we were able to tour and make some tiny amount of money, and some people showed up, and I don't know, things just grew from there.
Well, I want to talk about this book, The Consumer, here. It's like, I've had this is like my second copy. I think I lost the other one in New York somewhere. I somehow found this at some library sale. But yeah, in this book, is The Consumer like kind of like an analog to the music a bit? Is it relate, or is it just some total other thing? It's not has anything to do with Swans.
Well, they come from the same mind.
Okay.
But I'm kind of ambivalent about that book. I mean, I think there's some good writing in it, but I'm not in love with a lot of it. I just made another book called The Knot, which has a great deal of that book in it, as well as other short stories and journals and all of my lyrics I ever wrote, including ones that weren't used in recordings. And I'm more sanguine about that book than I am The Consumer. Some of the writing in The Consumer was kind of juvenile.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I certainly tried. I don't know.
I think The Consumer, you kind of underplay. I think The Consumer is good. It's I mean, it's kind of like,
I think some of the writing is very good. Some of the writing is very good. Not all of it, certainly.
Yeah, there might be some.
But
that's like true of a lot of books, though. You know, like I mean, you had a mention of Francis Bacon in the book a little bit. Was that an influence? The paintings of Francis Bacon?
yeah, I mean, he was a sort of hero of mine. Just the way that he worked, and of course, the power of his images were immense. But his way of working, I think, is similar to the way I work, which is you kind of start with a notion and you start building things up, and before you know it, an image appears, and in my case, a sound appears, and then you just obsess over it, and gradually this thing is formed. And it's not like expressionism in the sense that, you know, you kind of just flail and that's your expression. It's very considered. His paintings are very designed, and they're quite beautiful, as well as cutting kind of deep into the psyche. And also admired the romantic aspect of his lifestyle, his carousing and sexcapades, and his ability to drink massive amounts and yet show up in his studio at 3 a.m. and paint and make these amazing paintings. Yeah, he was very much a self-made person, and somehow he's magic, you know. Somehow he became one of the most influential artists of the 20th century.
Well, in The Consumer, like, you know, there's this whole idea of the body and bodies consume other bodies, and bodies evaporate, and bodies come into being, and there's out of body experiences. I mean, what do you think of these out of body experiences? Is that a good thing? Do you seek that, or?
Well, I think it's a good thing if you can have one. It's more likely through moments of serious self-analysis and inspection. You start to think about your being and your existence. And if one thinks hard enough, you kind of realize that you are not solid, that you are comprised of millions of molecules, which will soon dissolve into the earth and be consumed by other beings, and that you're not entirely really here. I kind of think of it like maybe if you had a handful of dirt and you dropped it gently in the water, that's how your body is, and it just evaporates, and not evaporates, but dissipates into the surrounding atmosphere. And that's kind of a psychedelic vision that I had at a very young age, but has preoccupied me ever since.
What about the whole idea of individuality? I read this book a few years ago by Jean Genet, and there's a moment.
Which one?
It's called "Taking a Rembrandt and Ripped in Two." It's kind of an essay, and he's.
Oh, I'm not aware of that.
It was like one of those little books, those Hahnemann books that they published in India and by Francisco Clemente. And it might be, but it's he kind of sees a man in a train, and then he starts to question his own identity, and he thought, hey, maybe we're all the same person. He kind of, like, what do you think about individuality, and kind of like, is it, there's.
Well, that's a bit of a ponderous question for me to undertake answering, but my question would be whether there is any identity at all, ultimately.
Yeah.
Not whether you're another person or not, whether you're an individual, but whether the construct of being is a fallacy in and of itself.
Yeah, identity is a myth.
I don't know about a myth. It's a natural thing to assume. But if you meditate or practice meditation, for instance, you begin to strip away your notions about reality and yourself, and perhaps have some insight into that thing I mentioned about dissolving in water.
Okay, so the band, the Swans, got back together in 2010. I mean, do you consider that band more about improvisation? Is that what it was about?
No, it was about songs, but they grew into these pieces through attrition and work. We, as a group, were so organically connected just through the grace of God. I had no idea that when I restarted it, that it would work out so well. We all knew each other, but we had not all played together as that group before. And as we started to tour, it became obvious that we had something really good going on, and we started to feel phony playing prearranged songs, especially songs from the past. And so live, we would start to dissect them and let sections breathe, have open sections where anything could happen. And maybe something happened that night, and then next night I would say, let's take that and pursue that. And then we would pursue that thing that happened, and gradually these pieces would grow. And so the material from 2010 to 18, I guess, a lot of it was developed that way. I would start out, a lot of it with just my acoustic guitar, and I would take it to the group and say, I have this song, and then we would start to work on it. But through performing live, things really changed and grew. It's not like improvisation, like a jazz group. It's a different kind of thing. It's more like this kind of roiling sound that you're molding as a group.
Well, when I hear like some songs like Frankie M, and other songs, the Knot, like it seems like there's like kind of an introduction. There's an intro part where you're maybe playing like the same chord or note, and then the second part's like the song, and then there's like a third part which everybody's you're kind of like everybody's like looking at each other and making it more intense or less intense, and you're kind of like driving the song home kind of at the end. Like there's an intro, the song, and then kind of like this outro where everyone's kind of taking the song home, kind of like enforcing the point. Kind of like and it's getting more crazier and crazier. Will it ever stop? And it's like like it's almost like an acid trip, I guess.
Well, yeah, if it reaches that level, it's wonderful. I don't know. I mean, the material had the potential to elevate us on a nightly basis, throw ourselves completely into it physically, mentally, and psychically, for it to work. And we managed to do that to a remarkable degree. I think that group was the best group I ever had. And it was probably the pinnacle of any music I'll ever be involved in. What I'm doing now is different, and I think it's very good. I hope so. The musicians with whom I'm working are great. Many of them come from that previous iteration. And we're starting to really expand and grow the material in this new iteration. But I don't, have any illusions about reaching the heights that material reached from 2010 to 2018. That was sort of beyond our control. It just happened.
I mean, in some of the interviews before, I mean, you talk about songs as dead meat. Like, okay, that song's dead meat. We're not going to play that anymore. So, it's like roadkill. We're just going to like leave it on the road. It's back there. And
yeah, well, I mean, if something becomes rote, or you just feel like you're reciting it, and it's not actively electrifying your molecules as you play, then what's the point? And we're not a rock band in any normal sense, and I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to sell records. I mean, I hope to sell records, but I'm just fine if no one buys them. I'm fine if a lot of people do. I'm fine if no one comes. I'm fine if a lot of people come. It's what I do. I have to do this music, so I'm doing it. And if I'm going to do it with time I have on earth, it has to have some truth in it. And that to me involves risk and total 100% commitment to making a sound that resonates into the core of who you are as you make it.
Yeah, a friend of mine was at one of your shows at the Bowery Ballroom. He witnessed the sound check. He said that your sound check is probably better or more interesting than 95% of the bands out there. It's like, do you have any comment on that? Do you have
no?
Do you have super long sound?
Well, a lot of stuff that happened in the sound check was developing what was going to happen, what might happen later, not trying to get this one section right. It was more trying to find a new way to play something we already knew.
Okay, so let's see what else. Okay, so you record all the albums in Berlin now, or?
Well, I have been. That's just through happenstance, really. It turns out that Larry Mullins and Christoph Hahn and Dana Schechter live there, and we all have to convene someplace. And there's some facilities there we can use to rehearse that are reasonably priced. And there's a studio I use there with this fellow Ingo Kraus, who's an amazing engineer, called Candy Bomber, and it's very comfortable to work there. So we just go there to record and to rehearse.
Okay, well,
And
yeah, okay. Well,
go ahead.
I guess we got to wrap this up. If people want to go buy the records and stuff, like they should go to younggodrecords.com and go see them on tour, buy a lot of merch, buy a lot of t-shirts, buy all the albums, get the whole backlog, and you'll come out and meet them at the merch table, right?
Of course.
Okay.
You know where I learned that was Ralph Stanley.
Oh, Ralph Stanley.
I used to go to bluegrass festivals all the time. I love bluegrass music.
So
and he was playing wearing his black suit, and it was probably, I don't know, 98 degrees humidity. And that man, at however old he was then, 80s, went out and stood in the hot sun at the merch table and greeted people and signed stuff and was incredibly polite. And I just thought, that is commitment, and that's what you have to do. You have to meet people, you have to show them respect, and most of all, you have to be thankful for the fact that they care about the thing you love. And that was a shining example of how to behave as a musician.
Okay, well, thank you for talking to me today, and buy the music again. Younggodrecords.com. We'll talk to you. We'll see you at the shows, everybody.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah, cheers. Bye. Let's see. Okay. Oh.